Good morning. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, freethinkers, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural talked about from the podium. So today we have Bob Seidensticker is going to be giving a presentation, and I just wanted to say he's going to be talking on the financial dealings of churches, and I want to let everyone know, in case you didn't know, that Bob has a blog at Patheos called Cross-Examined. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me this morning. I'd like to talk about churches and responsibility with a focus on the financial aspects. The outline of my talk is one, politicking from the pulpit, churches' financial records, investigation of televangelists, a new way to see money flow within religion, and finally, are churches more like charities or country clubs? So let's talk about politicking from the pulpit. 2016 is another dreaded election year, which means that Pulpit Freedom Sunday, which you may not have heard of, is coming up at some point. This is a time where pastors who feel imposed upon by the IRS, where the IRS tells them they can't politic, that is, pick candidates from the pulpit, where those who feel constrained by that actually do it deliberately and as a way to flout the rules and to get change. What I find puzzling about this is they can speak on any social issue they want. The tax exemptions that they get come with strings attached, and that includes no politicking from the pulpit. If they find that a problem, they can always just drop their nonprofit status. Very easy. So let's explore this Pulpit Freedom Sunday a little bit more. The Alliance Defense Fund organizes this weekly or this annual protest, and the way they describe it is, on this day, the pastors will exercise their First Amendment right to preach on the subject of the moral qualifications of candidates seeking public office, despite federal tax regulations that prohibit intervening or participating in a political campaign. The point of the Pulpit Initiative is very simple. The IRS should not be the one making the decision by threatening to revoke a church's tax-exempt status. We need to keep the government out of the pulpit, which on the face of it sounds pretty good, except that, of course, the government is already in the pulpit. The government allows churches the tax-exempt status that helps them thrive. To learn more about this, I attended a church service led by Ken Hutchison in 2012 to hear his version. He said that that year there were 1,500 churches participating. He brought up 3 local politicians. He endorsed them, which again is against the rules. He said that the entire thing was taped, and that this tape would be sent to the IRS. That's not really all that bold a statement, all that bold civil disobedience, because of course the IRS is very weak in enforcing these kinds of things. But let's consider the logic of his position. He's saying that this is a free speech issue for him. If you and I can say which politician we should vote for or not, why can't he? Well, of course he can, except when he's acting in the position of being the representative of his church. The difference, of course, is very obvious. He is a nonprofit. You and I aren't. We do not get an exemption on our taxes, and his church does. There's a difference. Now, to make it easy for pastors like Reverend Hutch, let me give you the IRS's 5 commandments for churches. In return for the tax-exempt status, this is what they have to follow. Thou shalt not participate in any political campaign, either for or against any candidate. Thou shalt not make any partisan comments when acting in a church capacity. Thou shalt not contribute money to a political campaign. Thou shalt not excessively lobby government. And while issue advocacy is allowed, thou shalt not make use of it to make an implicit endorsement of a candidate. But of course, the IRS is just and righteous, and churches may organize nonpartisan voter education drives, voter registration drives, get out the vote drives. They can speak about important issues of public policy, and of course, the leaders themselves acting as their own individuals can say whatever they want to, just like you and I can. Tax-exempt status is a privilege, it's a contract, it's not a right, and it comes with strings. And of course, if they don't like that, they can just not be nonprofits. Let me just close this section with a quote from the Good Book. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. Now Jesus, when he said that, was saying you don't need to say, I swear by God, I swear on my mother's grave. You should be the kind of person that when you say something, everyone knows, based on your reputation, it's going to happen. Now, why is that not the case for pastors? Section 2, churches' financial records. I'm sure most of you know about the Freedom from Religion Foundation. This is a free thought organization that has won some very high-profile lawsuits focusing on the separation of church and state. Now, have you ever thought of what the revenue of the FFRF is? Well, I'll tell you what it is. In 2014, it was $4,087,921 exactly. Now, the way I know that is because I looked it up. They filled out an IRS 990 form. This is public information. There are organizations which provide the 990s for all nonprofits. It takes about 30 seconds to find this information. Now, all nonprofits, of course, except churches. Now, churches are the ones who were nominally supposed to be leading the charge in terms of showing us how to live a moral life. It's a little surprising that they're the ones trying to set the example, and yet they have to hide their books. They don't like the transparency. Furthermore, they're the ones who imagine an all-seeing accountant in the sky who will judge them for eternity for the actions they take here. It's okay for him to see it, not okay for us. We're the ones who have to pick up the slack, which amounts to about $92 billion, by the way. That's the amount that they don't pay in tax. The rest of us have to compensate for. And it makes me wonder what they have to hide. The Freedom from Religion Foundation's 990 has a very clear open to public inspection label at the top. On these forms, it has the salaries of each staff member, revenue, expenses, cash at the bank, mortgages, all of the financial details. They seem to shoulder this burden pretty well, and I would imagine the churches can as well. Now let's remember what we're talking about here. This is the religion where Jesus told the rich man, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Jesus said, what you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Jesus said, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, Jesus apparently didn't care too much for rich people, but he cared greatly for the poor. And I wonder how he would think of churches today when they are secretive about how they spend their money. Now, within the church community as a whole, there are organizations trying to address this. There is the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, which imposes rules on its members for proper governance. So it's a nice try. Let's give them that. Another organization is Ministry Watch. It's a clearinghouse that looks at financial metrics to compare ministries and churches. But this is just a baby step. Ministry Watch has fewer than 500 ministries in its list, and there are an estimated 350,000 church congregations in the U.S. And what's amazing about this is when you look at the list of 500, many ministries don't get a 5-star rating. The list of those who get 0 and 1 star is a who's who of televangelists and religious leaders. These are people like newsmakers like Benny Hinn, Rod Parsley, Creflo Dollar, the $65 million Gulfstream guy, Paul and Jan Crouch, the Trinity Broadcasting Network, John Hagee, Kenneth Copeland. John Hagee was the Four Blood Moons guy. T.D. Jakes, R.C. Sproul, Chuck Colson, Harold Camping's Family Radio, The World Was Gonna End, May 21st, 2011, that guy. Ken Ham's Answers in Genesis, the guy who's building the big ark. These people get 0 or 1 star from Ministry Watch. Now, there is some good news, again, looking within the Christian community. Some churches have opened their finances to their members. One survey said that about 92% of churches provide financial information upon request to their members, which sounds pretty good until you think about it. They provide financial information on request. Now, I told you that I looked at the information for the FFRF. They don't know I did that. That was anonymous. I found the salary for Dan Barker, for Annie Laura Gaylor, who actually makes $1 more, just a little bit of trivia there, than Dan Barker. I did that anonymously. Now you're a member of a church. For this 92%, you can find out the information if you ask. Now you're going to have to go up to the pastor and say, Pastor, not to cast aspersions, but I would like to see the books, please. That's how that works. And 92% is not 100%. There's 8% of church congregations, according to the survey, where if you ask, they will say no. I would like, Pastor, I'd like to see how my money's being spent. I'm sorry you can't see that. And of course, none of this helps any of us from the outside in the same way that going to some of these websites that have all the 990s, 30 seconds, find out whatever information you want to. There are 1.5 million ordinary nonprofits in the country. They have no problem with the 990s. The thing which I find most surprising about this is the status quo makes the churches look bad. The only reason to have the books hidden is for financial malfeasance. That's the only reason you'd want that. So Christians in America, this rule is making you look bad. It shouldn't be me leading the parade. It should be you telling Congress to remove this rule. Section 3, investigation of televangelists. I'd like to talk a little bit about some high-profile televangelists, and many of these are in the prosperity gospel domain of Christianity. For those of you who are not familiar with this, there's a number of verses which they cite. One of them is Malachi 3:10. This will give you an idea of what we're talking about. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. In other words, you sow a small seed of faith with God and he returns it 100-fold. Now, in 2007, Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican from Iowa, of the Senate Finance Committee, asked 6 high-profile, very public televangelists to provide more information about their organizations. Again, they're not obliged to, but he asked them to, and he said, my goal is to help improve accountability and good governance so tax-exempt groups maintain public confidence in their operations. So from the standpoint of these televangelists, he's a good guy. He's trying to polish their image, trying to make sure that the system works the way it should. He asked, the target of his investigation were 6 ministries. Let me just go through them really quickly. The first one is Joyce Meyer. She responded fully to the investigation. She joined the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, and she discloses her annual revenue to Ministry Watch. And that revenue is about $100 million per year. So she's the good one. She's the success story. Benny Hinn also gave complete answers to Grassley's questions. However, Ministry Watch has no information about him. Kenneth Copeland, he says that his ministry has in total raised $1.5 billion over its many years. He gave no information to Grassley, and the Ministry Watch grade, again, no information. Creflo Dollar, same thing. Eddie White, same thing. Eddie Long, same thing. Paula White, same thing. Now let's just take a step backwards and consider this. There are 6 organizations under investigation. This is not an ordinary busybody asking for information. This is a U.S. senator. And it's not just any ordinary senator. It's a senator, excuse me, who's a member of the Senate Finance Committee. So he asked this information, and he's basically stonewalled by these organizations. They basically say, make me. I have no need to. So that's surprising thing, number one, that they have the chutzpah to take the stand. Surprising thing number 2 is that there really are no repercussions for this. I sort of wonder, what do these people have to do to lose credibility among their own fans? The faithful are still faithful. They still make $100 million per year, ballpark. Again, I sort of wonder, who they have to kill to lose their credibility. Now, to go back to the Grassley investigation, excuse me. And again, just to be clear, the investigation is over. He asked for information. He got what little he got. And no more is forthcoming. So I would call it a failure, although a nice try on his part. The investigation listed 3 reasons why there might be issues with removing the exemption for churches. Now, they found no constitutional reason to keep the exemption, but here are the concerns they have. Let me try to address them. They felt that eliminating the exemption would unnecessarily burden the overwhelming majority of churches. Now, what they're saying is that most churches, the 350,000 churches, most are tiny, most are small, most are, have a volunteer bookkeeper, that sort of thing. But they have a bookkeeper. They have money coming in, they have money going out, they keep track of the records. How much time does it take to fill out a 4-page 990 EZ form? The 1.5 million nonprofits, the real nonprofits in the country, seem to do that just fine. Here's the tough part: taking the deep breath and opening to the world, to the public, to the people who subsidize this, how they spend their money. The second issue they have was this would burden the IRS's Exempt Organizations Office, which is stretched as it is. Now, of course, the thing we're asking for here is to have them fill out the forms. That's all we're asking for. That doesn't affect the IRS at all. If there were malfeasance, and that's the concern, well, fair enough. Maybe you need to spend more money to support the IRS to investigate this. And finally, they're concerned that this would be contrary to the intent of Congress. Now, that is true. Congress seems to bend over backwards to give little Christmas presents to the Christian community, tax exemptions, parson exemptions. There's more than we talked about today. But of course, that can change. And ordinary Christians, embarrassed by how this makes them look, could make their wishes known, and I would imagine Congress would adapt very quickly. Now, the ECFA, that organization within the Christian community, is a good first step. We already have the answer. We already have the IRS 990. The nonprofits, the 1.5 million nonprofits in the country, do fine filling that out. That's the answer, and it works. Section 4, a new way to see money flow within religion. Let me suggest a way to look at how the money flows into religion. Let's take General Motors as an example. General Motors in 2010 had sales of $73 billion, and they made 3 million vehicles. So it's real simple. We've got a black box called GM. $73 billion goes in, and 3 million cars comes out. That's how it works. Now, if you can do a first level look at where the money went, 87% went to cost of sales, manufacturing, etc. 8% went to sales, marketing, overhead, etc. And 5% was profit. Again, real simple. What's the equivalent for religion? For starters, it gets $100 billion in donations from Americans. We're talking about just the church in America. But that's not it. They get a huge amount of in-kind donations from volunteers. The people who sit up the chairs, the people who clean up, the people who do maintenance, the people who organize committees, the people who bring the food for the potluck. I would guess that's about another $50 billion. Again, the books are closed. How do I know? But this is just a guess. Let's say that religion gets $150 billion per year. That's twice what GM gets. So GM makes 3 million cars. If the church were a car company, they would make 6 million cars. Where are the 6 million cars? What is the output of the church as a black box? $150 billion goes in. What comes out? Now, for starters, taxes don't come out because they don't pay taxes. A tiny fraction goes to good works. I want to talk about that more in a little bit. A very small fraction. And the best way that I characterize all that money going in there is it goes to the marketing department. It goes to reassuring the flock, good for you for coming this week, and you got to come next week. You got to keep coming, and while you're at it, I'd like you to evangelize. So the majority of the money going in is to marketing. Religion is a very inefficient vehicle. Imagine GM spending that fraction of its money, 90+% on marketing. They would have a very poor product. GM doesn't need faith to stay in business, but it's the only thing keeping religion going. And finally, let me talk about what I think is the most interesting question. Are churches more like charities or country clubs? Now, most churches do good works. They might have soup kitchens, they might have food banks, after-school tutoring, that kind of thing. And in that way, they're like charities. But on the other hand, they provide the benefits, the social benefits of a country club. They provide networking, they provide friendship, community, that sort of thing. So, which is it? Which is a church more like, a charity or a country club? Let's think about organizations that are obviously charities to see what characterizes them. The American Red Cross has an annual budget of $3.3 billion, and of this, 92% goes to program services, the remaining 8% is overhead. Save the Children, a $450 million budget, 91%. World Vision, $1 billion, 85%. The ACLU, $70 million, 86%, and so on. So kind of obvious, we all know how charities work. That's how the money works for them. Now, country clubs. Now, I imagine that some country clubs have bake sales. They might host charity events on their property, pro bono, that sort of thing. But that's just going to be a percent or two of their total income. So you've got 2%, that would be a country club. 2% going to good works would be a country club. 85, 90%, that was going to be a charity. Now, the best estimates that, well, I now want to know what information do we have about churches to find out how much of their income goes to good works, and the quick answer, of course, is we don't know. Their books are closed, they're embarrassed, whatever, they won't tell us. There are estimates from the outside, and one estimate is about 2%. Maybe it's 10%. I think 2% sounds reasonable. So again, I ask, why are the churches embarrassed to make this information public? One reason, here's another estimate. This is from the International Bulletin of Missionary Research. They estimated $34 billion in financial fraud per year. That's worldwide, not just the US. But that would be one reason why churches don't like to open their books. While we're talking about money, again, the amount of money that we Americans subsidize churches' nonprofit status with is about $72 billion per year. But of course, in addition to the fraud, a much larger fraction is things they're simply embarrassed about. The inflated salaries, the lavish living, the mansions for the pastor, not for most, but for some certainly, the embarrassing expenses. Now again, within the church community, you have organizations like Ministry Watch. Let me tell you the pushback Ministry Watch has gotten for their work from the Christian community. They've been told by fellow Christians that it's not right for anyone to judge. It's not Christian to be critical. Examining a ministry shows distrust in God, and that their focus should be on God and not man. But again, shouldn't the churches be the ones who are modeling the right approach? Shouldn't they be modeling this kind of transparency? Again, let me close with a quote from the good book. This is from Titus. The overseer must be above reproach as God's steward. I wish that pastors would remember that a little bit more often. And let me just conclude by just stating the action that I would love to see happen. Now, much of what I've been talking about is arguing against the tax-exempt status of churches. If you want to imagine what they are like, they're much more like country clubs, which are obviously not tax-exempt, nor should they be, than charities. But that's step two. Step one is open the books. The exemption is ridiculous. We have an election year. This is not on anyone's radar. It's remarkable to me that this major issue is not even considered. But churches of America, open your books. Thank you.